Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Dali's Car. Their one and only album called The Waking Hour. This album is, for those that don't know, this is Peter Murphy from Bauhaus fame as lead singer, and then also Mick Karn's on bass. Who Mick Karn was originally in Japan. So this was an interesting time for the two artists. There was um, both bands had ended in 1982, 83, and sort of finding their way, playing on. I think Mick Carnes was playing on some other projects, if I'm not mistaken, and these two met up and decided to do an album together, and it was kind of a one-off. And unfortunately, it was a one-off. It would have been kind of interesting to see what would have happened, or what Peter Murphy's solo material would have sounded like if Mick Carnes would have continued to play. Um, in Peter Murphy solo stuff, I think that would have been pretty interesting. I really enjoy Mick Karn's playing. I think he's really a dynamic bass player. In some ways, he's kind of the one of the. I mean, along with Peter Murphy's great voice, which I really love his voice. Peter Murphy's I've always been a big fan of his baritone voice and his eeriness and the way he sings, and it goes. His voice goes really well with the music, in the type of music that he does. And Mick Karns is they're just the two highlights are basically his voice and you know and his bass playing, which is those are the two members. It makes sense, but they really stick out. And there's sort of like an electronic drums that they're doing on here, and it's really different and unique. And in some ways, because they sort of did some electronic drums on it, it kind of makes the other instruments and Peter Murphy's voice even stand out or shine even more so. It's because it sort of adds like a synthetic element to the sound, which is very. I don't know if it's really. I would say this is like. I don't know if it's Turkish music that they're really kind of like doing, because I know Peter Murphy lived in Turkey when he left UK, and I believe he's a Buddhist, right? So I don't know like culturally what type of music this is, or what is this Turkish music, or is this like a sort of like a Indian music, or it doesn't sound fully like a Eastern Indian music, so I'm guessing maybe it's more in the Turkey, um, you know, Eastern European sound. Like it's hard. I don't have the experience to know exactly what it is. But it's really interesting, and because there's a sort of a synthetic drum machine going on in it, along with his baritone voice and some unique sounds, it just makes for a really unique combination. Um, some of the drum programming is fairly simple, but there's a lot of sounds, and then Mick Karn's fretless bass, some of his like doodles, and his carefree way of playing, along with Peter Murphy's like really spooky, ominous vocals, just makes for a really overall just a fantastic listen to. And in some ways, the songs themselves don't necessarily live up to or exceed the overall sound. Like the sound is and the uniqueness is kind of leading the way. The songs themselves, there's some good ones for sure, and there's some very good ones for sure, but there's almost like a potential there if they could have had maybe a little bit more time together, or maybe if maybe they would have met in like 1988, 87, 89, where Peter Murphy was really kind of coming into his own as a solo artist. Like if it would have been a little bit better in that time. But I do like the earlier '80s rawness of this album a lot in the production and everything like that as well. And the early kind of drum machine again adds a different kind of element to it. But if the songs were a little bit better, this could be a like a I wouldn't say an all-time great, but as far as like something that was really unique and you would just, you know what I mean, it was something kind of like, it's just really like you want it to be even better because the sound is so much better. And the songs don't necessarily, some of them, you know, like one's, there's, first of all, there's only 7 songs. You know, one's an instrumental, so you're down to 6 songs. There's a couple songs that really don't end that great or don't really work up to anything or it doesn't really have a chorus, you know, but for what they are, it's still cool because there's like a avant-garde sort of experimentalism sort of going on there. It's it does really lend itself to being very odd and kind of haunting in a way, which you know is right up my alley because that's why I like Peter Murphy. Um, but I kind of wish there was a little bit more. First of all, more songs than 7, and then I feel like you know maybe a you know a little bit more a variation. Like when I think of like Peter Murphy's like Hysteria or Deep, you know, you have some ballads, really wonderful ballads, and you know then you have some harder rock ones which you know come from the Bauhaus side, come from his love of David Bowie and all that. And then you also have some sort of Eastern sounding songs in there too, like you know, like Turkish ones, like he did with the 100 Men, which was his band when he was solo. So this one doesn't. This album doesn't really have those variations. It's kind of more a little bit one note. There's really no ballad in here. There's no prettiness or melodic really or really rocking stuff. That's even new wave. It's just a very experimental. It's kind of in the one note kind of range and it's still really good. I really enjoy this album. I just I wish it was a maybe a follow up album, you know, to this. As far as the songs, I gave Dali's Car 3 stars. His Box is probably my favorite, three and a half stars. Cornwall Stone 2 3/4 stars. Artemis 2 1/4 stars. Create and Melt 2 3/4 stars. Also Moonlife 2 3/4, and The Judgment is the Mirror 2 3/4 stars. So I add up all the stars, and it's 19 and 3/4 stars divided by 7, so it's a 2.82. So that's sits at right around 66, 67, and I felt like I wanted to give it a couple more points, and because of the sound, how unique it is and how different it is. But I feel like I can't get to the. It's a very good album. Like, it's super close. You know, I got it at 67. I could easily put it at 69. You know, it could be that far up to being very good. But considering there's only 7 songs, one's an instrumental. There's not a lot of variation. There's no like knockout song here. I feel like it's hard to say it's a very good album and kind of get into that level. But again, a really unique album that I really like. I love Mick Carton's playing on here. It's if you like Peter Murphy, you have another Peter Murphy album to listen to, which is always a good thing for me. And it's just really cool artwork, by the way, as well. And I really like the sound of the album. If I was to give this a rating based on the uniqueness and the sound of the album, I'd probably put this in the. I'd probably give it like a 78 or an 84, somewhere in there. High, very good to excellent category as far as how it sounds and just the uniqueness of it and the creativeness just in the sound is so unique. And that could be because I'm very inexperienced with maybe this sort of sound. It's almost like a Dead Can Dance, um, you know, sort of. It's almost like verging, like if you mix like maybe like neo folk and new wave, like it could be in there. Um, you know, so again, it's really unique. But I don't have a ton of experience in kind of that Eastern sounding to really know how groundbreaking this really is. But you know, I mean, who from the new who from the new wave side and the post punk sound styles of music was doing this sound. And that way I know it's groundbreaking because I live and breathe those styles when I was a kid. So 1984, nobody's album sounded like this. It's a very haunting album, and there's definitely a high cool factor with this album for sure, and a uniqueness that is really almost unmatched in 80s music, in my opinion. It's a very cool album, but just wish there was a little bit more depth and a little bit more to the songs themselves to kind of meet the level of how great this album sounds. Um, and in that way, it's a hard album to rate or judge. You know, I could easily say this was album could be a 75. I could easily say there's not much going on. There's only 6 tracks that have words. You know, this isn't really an album. I could give it a low 60s or a 50s. You know, you can be all around in this album. You know, depending on your opinion but it really probably comes down to your appreciation of Peter Murphy's voice, which I love, and Mick Karn's bass playing, which I love. So that really helps kind of lean me towards it being a very good album. You know, very close. Just needs a little bit more ideas on the song and maybe a little bit more variation on the songs. And it would have been great if there would have been a double album. I don't know if you guys know Peter Murphy's solo album. It's utterly forgettable, and it's sad to say as how much I like his Cascade and Deep and Hysteria and Holy Smoke and even the last 2 Peter Murphy albums, Ninth and The Lion. Love all those albums. But the 1985-86 album he had, Should I Fall on Your Knife or whatever the album was, just a really poor album. I wish that they would have done a second album and not that album, and that would have been. I think they would have fine-tuned this album and really kind of taken it to the next level. I would have hoped, anyways. But yeah, that's my review of Dali's Car, The Waking Hour, from 1984. 67 out of 100. Really good album. Really unique. I'm curious to know your opinion on this album, or what do you think of my opinion on the album? All right, take care.